Good morning. One of the questions a CEO will ask him or herself is, of course, when is the right time to get listed? What are the right questions to be thinking about? How does it work in Europe, and how does it work across the pond in America? To tell us much more about this, we will be now meeting our panel, which will be moderated by the head of SME listing at Euronext, Guillaume Morelli. Guillaume?
Thank you very much.
Over to you.
You already said most of my life. So basically, among Euronext, I'm taking care of entrepreneurs, either already listed or willing to consider a listing and the way to help. But I'm pleased to moderate this panel with three wonderful entrepreneurs. Maybe Dominique, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Just a few words about my career that we can say is first in pharma industry. That was a lot of things to learn in pharma industry, and I am MD and immunologist, and I work a lot. And then after in biotech, first biotech that was public also, and second biotech, OSE Immunotherapeutics, that today I am chairman, is also public, and that is an honor.
Michael.
Yes, hello, and also nice meeting you here today. My name is Michael Kloss. I'm currently the CEO of eureKING, and we will talk about that a little later. Besides that, I have been spending more than 3 decades in the pharma industry. After a little bit of a detour into banking, I've been working for Bayer for many years in consumer health as well as in diabetes, where I led the division and also led the carve-out, became the CEO of Ascensia Diabetes Care, and subsequently the group CEO of PHC Holdings in Tokyo, in Japan, which a company which we took to an IPO at the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Happy to be here.
And the last but not the least, Jean-Luc, how are you?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Guillaume, and a happy Friday, all of you. Sorry not to be there. So my name is Jean-Luc, MBA by training. I have more than 25-year corporate finance experience in different CFO roles, and I joined the pharma sector in 2017 for supporting biotech companies, mainly in the context of an IPO. And I'm very pleased to be there with you this morning.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. So maybe before we start the panel, if I can give you some background about what is happening. The title of the panel is Challenges, Opportunities to Finance Health Tech. There was a lot of challenge over the last few years. Some of them were very positive, especially during the sanitary crisis, where we saw the importance of health tech to take care of this issue, and where we saw a huge interest around the world from investors and new investors that were looking to finance this company in order to find concrete solutions to what was happening. Now we entered into a new phase of challenge. That is much more microeconomical driven. There is an increase of the level of risk around the world, and we see that the investors are willing to reduce their risk exposure. And the way they reduce it is done in 2 ways. First of all, they maybe prefer more defensive sector than what health tech can be sometimes. But also within the health tech, we see a shift of trend where they want to invest maybe larger tickets in a smaller project, or in a smaller number of projects, where they want to invest in more mature health tech, and also and more to diversify their exposure within health tech. Of course, the drug discovery, of course, the development of new patent of new IP is the largest part of the amount invested in health tech. But we see in the listed world and in the non-listed world that specialist investor wants to diversify, with also a new trend that is emerging, and it's common to every part of the industry and economy in the world, how we can do better, cheaper. And I think that efficiency to treat patients, but also efficiency to treat patients at a lower cost is one of the issues that the industry will need to face in the coming years. And it also means that it creates opportunities to develop new way to finance, new way to answer to the need and the strategy of investors. At Euronext perspective, we also believe that the emergence of European health tech is structural. Of course, there is up cycle, down cycle. There are challenges that are emerging at every step of the economical cycle, but the importance of European health tech is not too big to fail, which is quite positive, and it is central in every idea, in every project, even at a stock exchange level. This is why, for example, we decided to accelerate the investment the financial community ecosystem is doing on health tech with two major initiatives. The first one is called Tech Share. It's a pre-IPO program, but it's born in France 7 years ago and now is pan-European, with the idea to build bridges between the private world and the public world, and to help entrepreneurs to get the code, to get the network, and to understand how to get public, and with support of already listed entrepreneurs like Dominique, who is doing a lot of mentoring for non-listed CEO over the last few years. And the second one, which is really key, is what we call Euronext Tech Leader. So it's the very first time that we created a pan-European market dedicated to fast-growing tech European companies, scale-up, unicorn, and even larger, because we believe that we are now strong enough to position ourselves at a continental level and to attract investors from all around the world to finance the best project. But maybe to enter more concretely into the current environment, Jean-Luc, you're a serial entrepreneur that has already done 2 IPOs, so maybe you can give us some background and some insight about what you have been successful to do.
Yeah, absolutely, Guillaume. Thank you. And I would like to precise that's clearly in the context of a biotech company, pharma companies, where there is a cash burn, a company, and that's based on my experience, who has very limited revenues, where I would say the IPO objective is clearly to raise money and to continue to raise money after the IPO. So I listed 2, 3, I would say, key attention points. The first one, and I would like to combine timing and maturity, and let me explain you that. So the timing of IPO is something which is quite important, but clearly you do not control that. If you take the current market conditions, clearly you will not see a lot of IPO in the pharmaceutical environment, because the market conditions are clearly not met. So the need, don't be in an urgent mode. That's quite, I think, quite important for an IPO. And the second aspect that I would like to link with the timing is the maturity of your scientific development, because that's quite important. When you start an IPO, when you document your IPO with the prospectus, you need the ability to forecast at least what you plan to deliver to your investors. And so in the public mode, a deviation versus what you communicate in your prospectus will impact immediately the valuation of your company. So be prudent, because you will be automatically penalized if you have an important or a material deviation versus what you forecast at the time of your IPO. So that's the first, I would say, key attention point, which is quite strategic and important for me, timing and maturity of your development. A second one could be the news flow. If you are a public company, you have to communicate in the market. That's clear. This is not exactly the case for a private company. So you have to be sure you create what I call the brand awareness. You create the appetite for investors, and the retail investors, for example, is as well quite important, because if you need a minimum liquidity of your stock, the retail investor could play, I would say, quite important role on that aspect. So come back to the news flow. A rich news flow is something which is quite important, at least for the next 2 to 3 years after your IPO. And this is not just the H1 or H2 financial results. It's much more, I would say, the scientific news that you should communicate to the market, top-line result of your clinical trials, EMA, FDA feedback, partnership, etc. That's something which is quite important. So to have a rich news flow at the time and after your IPO, and at least I would say for the next 2-3 years. A last one, which is maybe, I would say, the profiles of your shareholders. Clearly, you need to identify shareholders who will be there for the IPO, but as well for supporting you after that. So in general, friends and families who supported you at the time of the inception are very pleased with an IPO, but clearly the objective is not the same. For them, it will be much more an exit plan, an opportunity to have a stock, the right liquidity of the stock, and so to make a good return for the investment. VC is the same. Be sure that when you analyze the VCs that you have in your shareholder base before the IPO, check if your VC can support, you can pursue the investment later on when the company will become public. So my message here regarding the profile of your shareholders is really the role of the banks. Be sure to identify a bank who can help you to identify the anchor investor that you need for supporting your IPO, and as well institutional investors with deep pocket who are able not only to support you at the time of the IPO, but later on as well, and certainly for the next 5 years. So if you integrate this, just the first 3 key attention points that I shared with you this morning. Another aspect that you have to invest time on that in parallel of that is clearly the team that you need for supporting an IPO from a legal point of view, accounting point of view, finance, audit, etc. It's clearly something that you do not need to underestimate. So a seasoned team is clearly as well a success factor for an IPO project. So in conclusion, timing maturity is important, the quality of your news flow, as well as the seasoned team that you need. And if you can combine all of the 3, I would say, key attention points, I'm sure that you have the right approach for a successful IPO.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. But you've done 2 successful IPO, but let's imagine that you will do in the coming years a 3rd one. Is there something you will do differently?
Certainly, yeah. To anticipate much more the preparation of an IPO is not an exercise for the next 6 to 12 months. It's something which take a lot of time. I mentioned the profile of your shareholders. You have to meet a lot of people. You have to prepare a nice pitch. So it takes time, and certainly in the biotech sector, when you have no revenues, so you have to be sure that you have, I would say, the right ability to forecast what we plan to do in the next 2-3 years. So my advice is clearly to take the time to spend time on the IPO preparation.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. Dominique, you have been listed with OSE Immuno since 2015, so you have some history of using the capital market. Could you tell us a bit more about your experience and your feelings?
Thank you for this opportunity. I think what we need to go public is first enthusiasm, conviction, and humility. That is very important. And what is also important is to think about window, because window that you mentioned is important, and team, because team is also important. When we were public, that was in 2015, we were 2, Alexis Perrol and me, and we explained to the IMF that we are 2, but we have a group of people around of us. We were with a very high qualified consultant, and we explained that we have to manage a phase 3, and that was the reason to go in this area. And the phase 3 was in cancer. We have the need, we explained the need, and that was difficult to explain at 2 levels, and that is important also to say that is a 2 levels, the retail level and the level of very high science, because we are in first in class, we are with immunotherapy, and immunotherapy was not known. That was the first period of immunotherapy in 2015, and how to speak about cancer therapeutic vaccine, how to simplify, and also how to have the second level, because behind retail, we have also to explain that people that could understand is also pharma industry, because it's the relationships that are strongly important in this area. And that is one of the difficulties to speak at two levels. Retail, to be completely clear about what is the interest to be in immunotherapy, to have cells able to kill cancer cells. That is very simple to understand. But after that, you have also to explain that is a very specific epitope approach, and then to continue in this way. And the second aspect of challenge and opportunity is to say, when you are public, the key question is how to communicate, and how to communicate bad and good news. And that is important to say, that is clearly important to speak about that. And in aspect also important is to use the tool of to be public, because we have had the opportunity to see what was the landscape evolving, and the landscape was evolving with more and more actors in this area that we were in immuno-oncology field. And the vision was to say, okay, we have to come back and to find another company. And we find a company named Efimmune, and we merged with Efimmune. And that was, I say, the big success also of the rest of the portfolio, because after that, we were still running our phase 3, but we have new product coming, and with now 4 products in clinical, and in very advanced domain in immuno-oncology and immunoinflammation. And for this capability to do a merger, that was not easy to do a merger. That was a lot of effort with auditor, with a lot of people involved. But I think that was also the creativity and the possibility to do that because you are public, and that is important. And after that, the level of visibility, because you try to have visibility, is also with that you have a publication, and then you are visible for pharma industry, and you can create, that means something that is very important, credibility, because you are public. And because pharma industry is also looking at all the aspects that you publish, and they can see the science, they can see the publication, and sometimes we are surprised because we are publishing something in a very specific journal that is not so known by, that mean people in this, and we have contact with pharma industries. That's why now we have 3 pharma partners that are well known, that are Servier Laboratories, that is also Boehringer Ingelheim, and a company in the US that is Veloxis, but with a group that is Ashai in Japan, that is a big company in this area. That means that we are working at different levels, due to the visibility that to be public is also important for this aspect. After that, we have also to face crisis, because you say challenge and opportunity. Challenge is a crisis. When we have a crisis, what we have to do? To work, to work with conviction, and to push our product as far as we can, and that is the key element that we have in this second part, because I have seen also before the crisis in 2008, and to continue to have also relationship and to have also information to the market about what you are doing and what you are preparing for the next step.
Thank you very much, Dominique. What a great experience of being listed, and what an accomplishment you have done with OSE. Just because you mentioned crisis, and I fully agree with you. Is there also a need to be pragmatic when you are a listed company, and to raise capital when they propose you capital?
Yes, exactly. That is when we say window is window for everything, that we have a flat with different window. The window of partnering is one, the window of capability to have a fundraising is another. And to understand that exactly, you say before, that means to understand what is the vision of a short-term investor or long-term investor, and that is also a key question to understand at the beginning when you are doing this aspect.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Michael, you are newly listed on Euronext, but your story is very particular, so maybe you can tell us more about what is a SPAC, because you were the first health tech SPAC listed in Paris, and maybe you can discuss the process and what you want to do in the coming years.
Well, I start with the challenge you told me during our rehearsal, that how to explain it in 8 minutes. But I will try at least to go through this, and maybe starting by defining the vision of EureKING and what we want to achieve with our SPAC project. And it's really to make and to create a European leader in the bio-CDMO space and sector. CDMOs are contract development and manufacturing organizations, and with that, a very important partner in the development for biopharma projects, basically seeking for industrial capacities to create molecules, scale up molecules, so that they can meet the requirements for the clinical processes. I will come to that a little bit at a later stage. Now, definition of a SPAC. First of all, I don't really like the abbreviation, but special purpose acquisition company is definitely too long to mention every time you are talking to somebody. So unfortunately, we have to stay with the abbreviation. But maybe to define the objective, what is actually behind this word? Why has it been created? And it has been created as a vehicle for privately owned companies to facilitate to go public. I think the two other speakers have discussed, of course, the complexity of an IPO process. And here you have a vehicle, an alternative vehicle, which might be suitable to basically bring your company public, given, of course, certain conditions. What are the advantages? The advantages is obviously you shorten for your company the lengthy and to some extent very cost-intensive process to prepare for an IPO. You are, after the merger or the IBC, initial business combination with a SPAC, directly involved, or you are a publicly traded company, and you're not only listed, but you're already funded, because that's basically happening already at the IPO of the SPAC. And of course, it's also a vehicle. We talked about large companies, smaller size companies. Here you can also target and choose with the SPAC project to potentially target smaller size companies. For example, in our EureKING project, we are looking at companies with an enterprise value between 200 and 500 million initially. So what are the challenges for a SPAC? I think the most important one is, as you are not going in with your molecules, you're not getting in with your products, you're not going in with your overall business idea, it's very, very important to define the target sector you want to operate in. Not only the target sector is important, but also to define the right size of target companies and the combination and the understanding what are the requirements within the SPAC to actually meet them. Another challenge, a very important challenge, and that goes back again to the preparation time for a SPAC, is the limited time frame you actually have until you have to find a target company and do the business combination. In our case, EureKING, we have put ourselves the challenge for doing this in 15 months. And that goes to the fourth challenge, which is very important. You might have a very interesting project, but you have to have targets who are interested, who see a need in your project, who are interested and are actionable in this time. So the time window, once again, although it's not a classic IPO, is as important for a SPAC as it is for a classic IPO process. So in short, how does it work? So first of all, of course, you define your project and you define your team, which you need to around you. And the second, and maybe at the same time, really, you gather the so-called founders of the SPAC project who are putting on the one side founder shares at capital at risk to finance the operation, because as again, you don't have revenue during this time, so you have to, of course, finance your operation and the whole process over the 15 months. And at the same time, they also invest at market prices. In our case, we are looking at about 30 million euros. Then you constitute the SPAC as a company. We registered the company here in Paris, and that was back in March this year. Then you basically start immediately to start interacting with investors and go on your investors roadshow, because you want to keep the time frame between the initial registration of the company and the IPO for the SPAC as short as possible. So we went into the roadshow between March and May and completed, after IMF approval, the IPO at Euronext Paris on middle of May, 15th, 17th.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember that we ring the bell together.
And we're able, at that stage, to raise about 150 million. At the same time, we really started already engaging with the target companies because, as you said, time is ticking. You only have 15 months to really complete it, so it's important that you have a lot of pre-work already done so that you can start executing and start entering in conversation, concrete conversation with potential target companies who can really fit well into your project very, very quickly, which also will convince investors, obviously, as you go forward. So in the eureKING project, why do we believe we will be successful? First of all, I believe we have spent a lot of time with a very experienced team on understanding the market dynamics. And I think in two folds. One is the overall sector we are working in, where we're actually looking at a sector in the biopharmaceutical space, which is outperforming the overall pharma space by factor 2. And the CDMO space, which is actually, again, doubling in terms of dynamics and revenue development. So we're looking at a highly potent and highly growing subsegment of the market, which is really in needs of capacity. And it needs of capacity, in particular in 3 subsegments, which we worked and looked very closely into, which is cell and gene therapy, which is biologics, and which is LBP, so live bacteria. So again, we didn't want to go too broad. I think in a lot of cases, SPACs actually do the mistake of going very broad. We want to go into fintech, we want to go into healthcare. I think we zoomed very clearly into a concrete, highly attractive market subsegment, which has a need for really some transformation. We did that with a very experienced team. I don't want to count the years of experience in the pharma sector, in the CDMO sector we have on the team. I think we have a couple of hundreds in it. It's also very important that you work and engage very, very closely with your target companies or potential target companies to understand their growth dynamics, to understand their capital needs over the time, because we are here talking about really bricks and walls, we are talking about industrial installations, and of course they need to be financed for quite some period of time. We also engaged with the founders and families who are owning these target companies to a large scale and are interested in actually staying in the journey. Maybe not as majority shareholder, but definitely want to stay on board and don't want to give up on their assets. They are in need of a network, which we can provide also through this SPAC and through our years of working in this market segment. And of course, going forward, as we really want to do it in more than one company and create this network, we also can see synergies across the targets when they are growing to the next stages. So again, why do we believe we are successful? I think we have a very targeted project. We have also understood the investor perspective, which is more of a long-term one in our case. So really investors who are looking at these assets for a period of 5 to 10 years are not the short-term ones. So engaging with them is, of course, fundamental for this. You said about defensiveness or not defensiveness about the pharma sector. I believe that healthcare service providers are a rather defensive sector, which of course, especially with the current market conditions and frameworks, might be a little bit of an advantage over other projects. And as mentioned before also by one of the other speakers, I think to choose the right banks and advisors on all levels is very, very important. And not only advisors and banks, investment banks who have market knowledge and investor knowledge, but also have SPAC knowledge. And sometimes it's good to be the first in a market situation, but sometimes there's a lack then of actually understanding what it really takes on all the facets to be successful. What is special, maybe to conclude, about eureKING? Again, it's an industrial project. There's really concrete installations we are looking at. It's a build-up story. It is not like many SPAC projects, just, okay, you buy a company, you make a merger, and that's basically the end of the story. We are actually using this as a launch vehicle and not as a final purpose. We have a fully dedicated team. I think one of the things a lot of times go wrong as well is that it's not really clear who's actually working on this project. But here we have a clearly defined team, myself, other people involved, who have also a broad network and can tap into this as we need. We are supported at this time with strong family offices as founders of the SPAC. That is a particularity and something very important in my opinion, as well as a very good combination with EuroCare, which is an innovator, incubator actually, who's helping innovation projects to actually flourish into this space. So we have an understanding not only from an industrial perspective, but also from a real innovation perspective. And maybe some final observations from my side. SPAC is still a very new structure and tool, here in Europe at least. Has been raised a number of questions, so it's important that you need to have really a good fit with the target project. If you go too broad, if you're not well defined, if you're not clear what you really want to do, it's very likely that you will disappoint investors, you will disappoint your target environment, and ultimately your project will not come to fruition. It requires preparation. A lot of the time, which maybe a company needs to prepare for an IPO, you absorb because you need to do this before you actually start engaging with the company. But you need to take this time, which took for us, in our case, up to almost a year. But all this you basically do, and this is, I think, the key advantage which can work for the combination of a SPAC and a player in the bio-CDMO space, is that you enable the operating company to keep focus on the day-to-day business. Especially if it is a smaller size, mid-sized company, it is very important that they can really focus on what they're doing. You're complementing this with your activity while you basically offer them the possibility for an evergreen financing.
Thank you very much, Michael. Listening to the three of you, I have one question that is coming to my mind. Because when we discuss with CEO of a health tech company, most of the time you want to discuss about science because most of the time you are a scientist. And so you look at what I call smart money, so money coming from either specialized investor or either from pharma or a major business partner. But when you come to the listing and when you want to be high ambition and to continue to grow further, you need also to mix and to add to smart money what we call big money, so money coming from also generalist investors. But maybe Jean-Luc and after Dominique, what is your view on it? Is there a shift of mindset? You mentioned, Dominique, that you need to have a two level of explanation of science. Is it only that, or is it more than that? Jean-Luc?
Dominique, if you want to start on that topic.
I think normally when we have a publication in a journal or an article or something in Congress, it's difficult to understand what we have done, and we have to find the method to say that is a publication that we announced because we are at the big Congress of oncology, or the big Congress of inflammatory bowel disease, and what is the result? And that is not easy to explain that we have a new target and then we are the first in class, and that we can say the name that people can understand, but to traduce what we have seen in results for patients, because all people are, that means related with some patient in this area, and that is important for us because we are in biotech oriented with clearly patient view. To traduce something that we have seen in science is something interesting for patients. As an example, we published in ASCO, the big Congress on oncology, and we were focused on quality of life result with our first product that is in phase 3 and is better, significantly better than chemotherapy. And of course, for people in the world that there are with some people treated around, they know that chemotherapy is something aggressive, good for cure, but that is important to traduce that if we have not only survival, but survival in good condition, every person can understand in the retail and in the view of pharma interest. And that is the enormous, that means effort to translate what we can see in article, publication, poster, because sometimes it's a name that are difficult to understand, in something that is in the life of people. And that is important to say that.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And for you, Jean-Luc, do you think that you also need to have an investor relationship with also generalist one? and to add big money to smart money to grow further?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite important. As mentioned by Dominique, the vulgarization of your innovation is something which is quite important in order to I would say, to convince and attract generalist investors as well as the retail investors. So yeah, so if you have the right technology with innovation, it's I would say it's easy to attract specialized investors because they can invest time, understand your technologies, etc. But if you want to convince a generalist funds, and there are many available in the market, it's important to, as mentioned by Dominique as well, to talk about the patients and try to simplify as much as you can your technology in order to be sure that you can convince and have, I would say, the right attention from generalist investors.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. There is also a second pattern that I learned from this panel. Is there also a need to do more M&A, more partnership between the health tech industry in Europe? This is the key pillar of your strategy, Michael. Dominique, you have done it successfully with Immune. It's not that common in the health tech industry in Europe to see industrial partnership, merger, acquisition. What do you think of it? Is there something we should do more or we look more?
I think overall we can observe that we are, in my view or in my understanding, entering somewhat into the next phase of development of new solutions, new therapies, new ways of having therapies in the pharma sector for patients. And that creates a lot of new players. That creates a lot of different knowledge, which is necessary. And sometimes even we don't even know what is the next phase, what we actually have to have on board to be successful in some of those. Whether this is AI knowledge, whether this is a different understanding of synthetic biology, whatever it is, things which have not been really traditionally embedded in the pharma industry. So I think in this dynamic process, there will be new partnerships, there will be new observations of what we have to have in-house, what you want to have partner with, what you want to potentially acquire, or what you want to spin off. So I think the dynamic will, in my opinion, over the next couple of years, well, depending maybe on the market environment overall, the macro environment, rather accelerate. But from a pure healthcare perspective, yes.
Thank you. Maybe, Dominique, you can share your experience of it.
I think an important item for merger, because we have seen that a lot in pharma, when you have a merger is sometimes opposition. Mm-hmm. And what is important if you are doing that in biotech is to understand if we share the same vision. And I have had the opportunity to thank Marivonne. We have the same vision in this, and how to create that in the global company when we go in this area. And the first decision that we take, because Immune was in Nantes and we were in Paris, is to take the headquarters in Nantes. And that was very important to say, not to be as usual in France, centralization, that is something important, but to go in the region that the company was doing the research. And that was a key element of sensitivity of people. And I think that was very important decision to go in this approach, to think about first, of course, science, human, but human first. And then I think with this dynamic, the growth of the company together, because that is today no idea who was Immune, who was Osé Pharma. And if you have, as an example, in pharma industry, I was Euxt Marion Roussel, and after that was Aventis, and after that was Sanofi. And you have people saying, I am still Santé Labo, or I am still... That is interesting to understand that the DNA of people is still here. Even the acquisition process on 10 years was done and that it normally accepted. People are still in the DNA. And if you are in biotech, you have to select something that is, we share the same DNA in this approach.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And Marivonne, next year you will come with us on the panel. Is there a question online? how we treated them.
We don't have any questions online, actually. No. Can we take one from the room, perhaps, in the auditorium? Who would like to ask a question? Yes? No, we don't seem to have anybody. No, okay.
So
All
I
right.
guess we can say you goodbye. Jean-Luc, it was a great pleasure to meet you this morning. Dominique and
Guillaume.
Michael, thank you very much for your time. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for this compelling conversation, which, of course, everybody can continue by joining us on social media, #HCID4. Please continue the conversation and telling us how you're taking the event today and throughout the day. We are now going to be taking a longer break and starting again at 10:05. And at that point, we will be meeting people and exploring the expanding diversity of talent needs for young life science companies. So enjoy your conversations, networking, and coffee, and see you again at 10:05. Thank you.